It's 2016 all over again. Once again, hardworking Americans are being called racist for objecting to having their generosity taken advantage of by overwhelming waves of immigrants. Over the weekend, the New York Times revealed that a massive fraud had taken place in Minnesota's Somali community, posing as charitable NGOs feeding the hungry or protecting the homeless or servicing autistic kids. Nearly 90 Somalis have been charged with embezzling up to $1 billion in government funding dispersed during the COVID pandemic. No children were fed, no homeless were housed. The money was spent instead on luxury cars, mansions, and real estate overseas. And when officials from the Department of Education tried to investigate, the Somali criminals threatened to sue and call them racist in stories that would be sprawled across the news. Can you even imagine being gifted the greatest privilege on earth, the gift of American citizenship, and then turning around and throwing that generosity back in our faces, stealing from the very people who gave you that gift? It is galling. And yet, the liberal cable news channels refused to even cover the story until they could make the Somalis the victims of it all.
Anything. So coming into the States, everything from the snow to, you know, the housing, the homes that we were all of a sudden occupying, everything was a shock, honestly. Every day was something new, and I'm like, oh my God, this is just getting worse. Yeah,
So what state did you guys land, first of all?
Kansas.
Kansas City.
Of all places, yeah. It was like a boot camp for Maine, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's just like, right, like, I mean, anyone who lives in Maine knows Maine and has ever visited Kansas, they will know what I'm talking about. It's just a lot to deal with as a person of color, honestly, or a black person.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about this fascinating interview between Ilhan Omar and Margaret Brenning on Face the Nation, where Ilhan Omar is going to get confronted about the rampant fraud that has been committed by Somalis, people in her community, okay, people that she took campaign donations from. And that is what the Trump administration is currently investigating, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went on Face the Nation first to discuss this fraud and the investigation that's being done by the Trump administration. Take a look.
I'll let you go. I want to ask you about this massive fraud out in Minnesota, and the state welfare program has been under federal investigation since all the way back in 2022. The president told you, though, this week to look into Somalis who, quote, ripped off that state for billions of dollars. He said they contribute nothing. What exactly are you investigating?
Well, Margaret, to be clear, the initial fraud that was discovered by the IRS, for which I'm the acting commissioner, is discovered by IRS Criminal Investigations Unit. This was not an endogenous thing that the state of Minnesota decided we had to go in and clean up the mess for them, and this is part of the continued cleanup. A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud, including those who donated to the governor, donated to Representative Omar, and donated to A.G. Ellison. But they've been transferred to something called MBSs. And those are...
Mortgage-backed security? What do you mean?
Sorry?
Transferred to what?
These are money the Bureau services, and they are wire transfer organizations that are outside the regulated banking system. And that money has gone overseas, and we are tracking that both to the Middle East and to Somalia to see what the uses of that have been.
Okay, but you have no evidence of that money being used to fuel terrorism at this point, which is what some conservative writers are alleging.
That's why it's an investigation. We started it last week. We'll see where it goes. But I can tell you that, you know, it's terrible. You know, Representative Omar tried to downplay it, said, oh, it was very, it was very tough to know how this money should be used. Yeah. You know, she was gaslighting the American people.
Well, we'll talk to her.
Yeah, but you know, when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people.
Well, there are plenty of criminal behavior from communities well beyond the immigrant community. But we'll talk about this with Representative Omar shortly. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Good.
Yeah, and Margaret Brennan did end up softballing Ilhan Omar about the accusations of fraud and taking campaign donations. And Ilhan Omar pretended as if she didn't really know anything about the people that committed fraud that she was palling around with and took campaign donations from. But at the same time, admits that she did take campaign donations and she gave them back.
And we're joined now by Minnesota Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to with you, but I want to pick up on where the Treasury Secretary just left off. He alleged that people who were tied to you or your campaign were involved in this broad, brazen scheme to rip off the Minnesota state welfare system. Do you want to respond to that? Do you know what he is referring to?
I really don't, and I don't think the secretary himself understands what he's referring to.
Flashback. All right, this news just breaking moments ago. Fox News has obtained photos of one of the Somali illegal immigrants wrapped up in the Minnesota fraud scandal, posing with several high-profile Minnesota Democrats, including Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and Governor Tim Walz. The man pictured is Abdul Dahir Ibrahim. He entered the country in 2000 and has had an order for removal since 2004. He also has a prior conviction in Canada for asylum and welfare fraud. ICE tells Fox News Ibrahim was granted temporary protected status for 10 years, but should have never been eligible. We are going to have more on this in our next hour.
Well, now investigators are tracking the web of fraud to other Minnesota Democrats, such as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Many of the suspects linked to the scheme live in her district, including a restaurant owner who hosted events for her. He has since been convicted of stealing $12 million in COVID funds.
horta aad iyo aad aan ugu faraxsanahay in maanta safari aan soo gaarnay sida dadka badan ay u og yihiin ciyaalkeena yaryar ilaa iyo number la eg 20 milyan oo ciyaal iskooley ah waxay cuntadooda ka helaan iskoolka kaliyo.
The whistleblowers that I've spoken to are saying that the governor knew, and the governor and Lieutenant Governor and even Chris Schmitter, who was his chief of staff, came to them as staff and scolded them for pointing out fraud.
Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar told CNN this week she believes the fraud spiraled out of control because COVID programs were rolled out without sufficient guardrails. It's also worth noting the owner of the restaurant where Omar held her 2018 victory party is among those from the Somali community who have been convicted of profiting from the schemes. Harris?
We obviously had people who were able to donate to our campaign that were involved. We sent that money back a couple years ago. And actually, I was one of the first members of Congress to send a letter to the Secretary of Ag asking them to look into what I thought was a reprehensible fraud that was occurring within the program.
So this was, just for our audience, the Biden-era Justice Department called it the largest COVID fraud scheme in the country. And this was pocketing COVID-era welfare funds, more than $1 billion in taxpayer money that was stolen. It was pretty shocking. Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also, as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when confronted about specifically why is it that the fraud was allowed to spread, Ilhan Omar has nothing, right? Her answer is, well, we're the victims too, us Somalis. We're taxpayers and we're victims. And it's like, well, you might be taxpayers, but likely you're not net taxpayers. I mean, we've already went over the tax numbers. I think that the Somalis are contributing an average of $700 to $800, right, to taxes per person, right? Not that much at all, okay? And we're talking about on a yearly basis, right? On a yearly basis, I wouldn't say that that's really all that much, considering how we're talking about billions in fraud. I mean, we're talking about an estimated $8 billion. It could be in upwards of $8 billion in fraud. And when, again, confronted about this, when really pressed on this, of course, Ilhan Omar, she wants to boohoo, whine, and cry racism, right? It is racist that the Trump administration is investigating the Somali community for fraud. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the rest of this interview with Ilhan Omar.
So there are 80,000 people of Somali descent in your state, but the president has been very focused not just on them, but on you. In this extraordinary cabinet meeting, he said Somalis, quote, come from hell. They complain and they do nothing but bitch. Take a listen.
These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. We don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it. Thank you very much, everybody.
That knocking is vehement agreement from his cabinet members there. I just wonder what the reaction is in your district to have that from the highest office in the land.
It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. These are Americans that he is calling garbage. And we feel like there is an unhealthy obsession that he has on the Somali community, and an unhealthy and creepy obsession that he has with me. I think it is also really important for us to remember that this kind of hateful rhetoric and this level of dehumanizing can lead to dangerous actions by people who listen to the president.
Yeah. Again, this is the same person who had this to say about Charlie Kirk, who was actually assassinated because of left-wing rhetoric, like the same type of rhetoric that she spews commonly about people who disagree with her.
I do believe those of you who are interested in rewriting this hateful man's history are full of shit.
Thank you.
I just think it was the video where it called him Dr. Frankenstein and said his monster shot him through the neck. I mean, obviously this is a person, and looking at this is someone who was a husband and a father, and in the days after his shocking death, that happened as a result of his views, or it happened as a result as he was sharing his views publicly with people, that people found it jarring to hear such criticism of that in the immediate aftermath of
what
death.
I find jarring is that there are so many people willing to excuse the most reprehensible things that he said, that they agree with that they're willing to have monuments for him, that they want to create a day to honor him, and that they want to produce resolutions in the House of Congress honoring his life and legacy. It is one thing to care about his life, because obviously so many people loved him, including his children and wife. But I am not going to sit here and be judged for not wanting to honor any legacy this man has left behind. That should be in the dustbin of history, and we should hopefully move on and forget the hate that he spewed every single day.
But once again, these are the real victims, right? According to them, right? In their minds, okay, it's not the people who actually were assassinated, right? The side of the aisle who routinely faces assassinations because of left-wing rhetoric. No, it's them. They're the real victims just because their fraudulent activities are getting exposed. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And 95% of the Somalis in your state are U.S. citizens.
Yes.
Just for clarity there. But the president has restricted all immigration processing, including asylum claims from Somalis already on U.S. soil, along with 18 other countries. ICE reports it has rounded up about 19 people, and they put out press releases with the images of about 5 of them that they say are the worst of the worst. Is that the entirety of the crackdown to date?
Yeah, so far we know of the people that they've picked up in Minnesota. About 5 of them are Somalis. And from what I have read and from the people that I've spoken to, all of them had already had orders of removal. So these are not people who are undocumented, but people who have committed crimes and who should have already been sent out of the country.
I want to ask you about something else that the architect of the president's immigration policy, Stephen Miller, said. On Thanksgiving Day, he posted, "No magic transformation occurs when failed states cross borders. At scale, migrants and their descendants recreate the conditions and terrors of their broken homelands." What do you make of this argument of failure to assimilate and sort of ruining America? How do you understand this?
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me, yes, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany. And you know, as we know, there have been many immigrants who have tried to come to the United States who've turned back, one of them being Jewish immigrants. We know the way that people were described who were coming from Ireland, Irish immigrants. We know the way in which people were described back then when they were Italian immigrants. And to me, you know, we're yes, of course, ethnically Somali. We are in this country as Americans. Yeah. We are citizens. We are productive part of this nation, and we will continue to be.
Amazing. Amazing. Do these people not realize that Stephen Miller is a Jew? Right? Do they not understand this? Why they continue to essentially call him a Nazi and to compare Stephen Miller to a Nazi when Stephen Miller is a Jew, right? I mean, it's kind of weird to me that these are the same people who boo-hoo whine and cry, "Oh, but that rhetoric is dangerous," right? While at the same time, again, calling people that they disagree with Nazis, right? Including Jewish people. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So what you have here, again, is a lack of accountability, once again, from Democrats. I think Ilhan Omar needs to be investigated. She is facing investigation. Tim Walz should be investigated. Keith Ellison should be investigated as well, too.
The lure of extremism, violent extremism, is false. It's a lie, and it's going to end up with you dead or in jail without ever participating in some noble cause that they're promising. So that's the idea, to help them understand what the truth is, and that involves engagement, that involves inclusion, and that involves, I think, some resources, because I can tell you this, a lot of Somalis in my district feel like there's not enough community resources, there's not enough available for them because they're working class folks and came here refugee status and fighting poverty.
But let me just say this. We all want to protect the public dollar. We want to prosecute people who engage in fraud. We are up for that. But we can't do it on a partisan basis. We got to do it together. We can't use incidents like this to score a political point. We got to come in as a state and say, you will not steal money intended for poor people, and prosecute them. That's how we protect the resources of the state of Minnesota. And I'm standing here.
So should the police officers be, I guess, arresting folks who they feel are using excessive force?
Look, the police chief, Brian O'Hara, great man, by the way, is well able to speak for himself. But I think what he's hoping is to prevent. This is why he's making the comment now, so that it doesn't ever come to that. So that ICE agents will observe the requirements of the law, and that and that they will know that we're not going to stand by and let them break the law. And if everybody does what is within their purview and jurisdiction to do, we'll be all better off.
Yeah. So I don't think it's ICE agents who should be arrested. I think it's these Democrats who should be arrested, because I think it's obvious at this point that they're all complicit, right? That they all were benefiting from this fraud scandal. And I think that's what this investigation is ultimately going to show, that they were taking campaign donations while at the same time advocating for these handouts to the Somali community that the Somalis used to then funnel the money to terrorists and into the pockets of these Democrats, again, via kickbacks, campaign donations, and into their own pockets, right? And yeah, I mean, they definitely did not want anybody looking into it. They didn't want any oversight. This is why they allowed it to happen. They benefited from it, and I think that's the reality of what's happening here. And the more that they boohoo whine and cry hate, bigotry, and racism, I think that is more evidence and proof that they are all complicit, that they are all guilty. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.